Hello everybody and welcome back to another lesson. Today I'm going to teach you about comma rules in writing. It's one of the most helpful and practical lessons you can take to improve your English since commas come up in writing all the time. So let's get started. So after finishing this lesson, you'll be able to write long, complex, complete, error-free sentences, know when, where, and why to use commas, improve your writing using a mixture of clause types, and improve your writing flow and cohesion. Okay, so just a review here of independent and dependent clauses. Here we have, John tried to find Sally at the supermarket, but he couldn't. So if we remember, an independent clause is a clause that can live on its own as a complete sentence. And in this sentence, John tried to find Sally at the supermarket can live on its own. So it's an independent clause. The dependent clause, he couldn't, cannot live on its own, so it needs an independent clause to form a complete thought. And then we have the coordinating conjunction but that joins the two together to make one complete sentence. All right, let's talk about coordinating conjunctions because they're an important topic when it comes to commas. A coordinating conjunction is a word that connects words, phrases, or clauses to make a complete sentence and thought. So they are for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. All right. This is also known as fanboys. Okay. It's an acronym to help you remember them better. All right. We need to know all these because when we start looking at these comma rules, we'll need to know if we're using one of these fanboys because that is going to change things as to whether or not we need a comma in that sentence. Okay. Before I get into the specific comma rules, let me start with one comma don't. Okay. It's important to remember that we don't use commas in places where we want the reader to pause, like we might pause when we're speaking something, okay? Just because you pause when reading or saying something out loud, that doesn't mean that you need a comma at that place in the sentence, all right? So the first thing to know is that there is no link between pauses when you're reading something and commas in the sentence. All right, let's get into the comma rules now. So starting with comma rule number 1, okay, combining independent clauses. When we combine two independent clauses together with a coordinating conjunction, we have to use a comma before the conjunction. So, as an example, I went home because I was tired, but Sally decided to stay out. All right. Here we have two independent clauses combined with the coordinating conjunction, but. So we must use a comma, and of course we put it before the word but. Now, if we look at this example, I went home because I was tired, but Sally didn't. Here we have an independent clause and a dependent clause joined with a coordinating conjunction, so no comma is needed, all right? In this next example, don't you remember? I stayed at the bar and you left. I stayed at the bar is an independent clause, but you left is dependent. So here again, we don't need a comma. So just keep this in mind. Independent clause plus coordinating conjunction and a dependent clause don't need a comma. But two independent clauses combined with a coordinating conjunction, we need the comma. Okay, a few more examples. I was planning to go home, but towards the end of the party, I got a sudden burst of energy. Here in the first clause, we have a subject, a verb, and an object, and it makes a complete thought, okay? So it's an independent clause. Then in the second clause, we have I, which is the subject, got, which is the verb, and a sudden burst of energy, which is the object. So here we have two independent clauses, and we're using but, which is one of the fanboys, okay? So here we need a comma before the coordinating conjunction. In the next one, I made friends with a lot of people at the party, and I think I'll probably hang out with them again in the future. So we can identify the two clauses here by the comma and the coordinating conjunction, which here is and, all right? So before the comma, we have, I made friends with a lot of people at the party, okay? So the subject is I, right? And then we have the verb, the object, and it's a complete thought, okay? So then after that, we have, I will hang out with them again. which again is subject, verb, object, and forms a complete thought. All right. So once again, we have two independent clauses combined by a coordinating conjunction, which means we need the comma. All right. And for the last one, I don't enjoy loud music, nor do I enjoy dancing close to strangers all night. Once again, sorry if this starts to sound a little bit repetitive, but I want you to get this. We have I don't enjoy loud music, subject, verb, object, forms a complete thought. Then we have I don't enjoy dancing, which is subject, verb, object again. Okay, so just like the other two, we're combining two independent clauses with nor, which is one of the fanboys. So we need that comma. Okay. Now that you see really how simple this is, it's almost like formulaic, okay? Like it's a math equation. I want you to be able to do this on your own. You just have to ask yourself these same questions, right? Is there a subject, object, and a verb in each clause? Does it form a complete thought on its own? Are we combining it with a coordinating conjunction? Then you can figure out on your own if you need a comma. All right, for comma rule number 2, we're looking at introductory clauses. An introductory clause is a dependent clause that comes at the beginning of a sentence before the main independent clause. So normally if we have an independent and a dependent clause together in a sentence, we don't need a comma. But if we change the order and we put the dependent clause first in the sentence, then we need a comma after it and before the main clause. So in our example, after getting to know each other a bit over dinner, we decided to go out to a nightclub, okay? So here we're starting with the when, right? We're starting with this dependent clause that tells us when it happened, okay? But we're moving it first in front of the main clause, the main independent clause. So we need a comma after it before the main clause starts. Now, if we use the format we've learned before, we decided to go out to a nightclub after getting to know each other a bit over dinner, we would not need the comma because we would have an independent clause and a dependent clause, right? And the dependent clause will be coming after that main independent clause. So in that situation, we would not need the comma. But if we decide to flip it and put that dependent clause first, then we need a comma. A few more examples of this now. Once it stopped raining, I walked down to the street to catch a taxi. So here again, we're starting with the dependent clause first, so we need the comma after it before that main clause. Somewhere near the subway station, I started feeling sick and had to stop walking, okay? So now here we're starting with telling you where, right, as an introductory clause. So again, we need that comma. And lastly, sometimes when the pollution is really heavy, I wear a mask to protect my lungs and health. So here's another when introductory clause. We're telling you sometimes when this happens, I do this main independent clause. So since we're starting with that dependent clause again, we need the comma. All right, if you recall from the sentence and clause types lesson, a relative clause is a type of dependent clause that gives extra information about a noun or a pronoun in the independent clause in the subject of a sentence, all right? Now, the difference between a defining and a non-defining relative clause is, does it change the definition of the subject? Does it change who or what the subject is, or does it just add some extra information about that noun or subject? So, for example, the t-shirt I was wearing at the time, which I had just bought that day, wasn't an option because I had spilled pizza sauce on it. The subject here is the t-shirt I was wearing at the time. The fact that I bought it that day is just extra information. It doesn't change the shirt that we're talking about, right? So again, that means it's a non-defining relative clause, which means that it's just adding extra information. And since it's just adding extra information, we need commas around that relative clause. If it were a defining relative clause, meaning that it's defining the subject and it's a part of the subject, then we would not use those commas, okay? If we take a look at these examples, the first one, my friend Julie, who loves antiquing, helped me find all these cool things. My friend Julie is the subject, right? The fact that she loves antiquing is just extra info about how she helped me find these cool things, okay? But then my friend who loves antiquing helped me find all these cool things. Now in this example, the subject is my friend who loves antiquing. So now it doesn't need commas because now it's part of the subject, right? It's a defining relative clause here. All right. The newest Lamborghini, which my friend has just bought, is the most expensive car in the world. Okay. Again, here we're just adding extra information about the newest Lamborghini, but the subject is the newest Lamborghini. Okay. That's the subject. But in this example, the car that my friend has just bought is the most expensive car in the world. The car my friend just bought is the subject. So it's a defining relative clause, meaning that we don't need commas there. All right. So hopefully by seeing these side by side, you can now understand the differences and better understand when you need commas and when you don't need commas with these types of relative clauses. Okay, for comma rule number 4, we're talking about a series or lists of items. So for example, this evening I'm going to update my CV to improve my cover letter, and then I'll fill out some job applications. Here, we're listing everything we're going to do, okay? Talking about a series of things in order that we're going to do them. So we need a comma after each item in the list or the series, all right? Can you please email John, Sally, and Victoria and ask them if they can reschedule our meeting? Same here, right? I'm listing the people who I want you to contact, right? So in that list, we need a comma after each item in the list. Felix is going to buy cola, ice, and some mixed fruits for the party. All right. Again, pretty simple, listing the items that Felix is going to buy. So we need a comma after each item in the list. Comma rule number 5, we're talking about interjections. Interjections are words that show some reaction, usually with emotion, right? Wow, that movie was incredible. We need a comma after that wow, okay? Because we're using that interjection to show that emotion. Same for these two. Well, if you can't make it to the party, I don't want to go without you, all right? Or, it feels so nice to sit down after being on my feet all day long. Okay. In both of these, we're expressing some feeling or reaction to something, and we separate these words from the rest of the sentence with a comma. All right, just a couple more now. Rule number 6, we're talking about something called coordinate adjectives. Okay. Coordinate adjectives are adjectives that could be joined with and. All right. So it was a bright, sunny day. We could say it was a bright and sunny day. It was a long, boring speech. I'm looking for a nice, affordable apartment. All right. All 3 of these adjectives could easily be combined by saying something like, it was a bright and sunny day, it was a long and boring speech, or I'm looking for a nice and affordable apartment. So anytime we have multiple adjectives that could be combined with and like that, then we're going to use a comma to separate them. All right, this one is pretty self-explanatory, but rule number 7 is any times and dates, addresses, titles, and numbers. Okay, so the next full moon will appear on December 7th, 2022. Our company moved to 1515 Market Street, Suite 1200, San Francisco, California, zip code 94103. The book was called Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. The population is 3,497,539 people. So in all these, right, we have a date, then we have an address, and then we have a title of a book, and then we have a long number, which is a population. And just to note, the rule for numbers in English is that we use a comma every 3 numbers, right? So every 1,000, we use a comma. Okay, so again, pretty self-explanatory. Just look out for these anytime you're doing writing with one of these items. All right, last rule, as I already mentioned before in a different way, but just want to clarify here as its own rule. Rule number 8 is when not starting with the subject, which would be the who or the what, then we need a comma, okay? So we talked about this a couple slides ago, but also in another lesson on the sentence structure lesson. But anytime we start with something like the where, the when, the how, or the why, then we have to have a comma after that, as it is now an introductory clause, okay? So yesterday I was thinking about going to the gym. That's a when, all right? So we need a comma after that. Because it was raining, I decided to stay home. That's a why, so we need a comma after that introductory why clause. Due to her current situation, she's been having a really tough time. Okay, that's another why. So we need a comma after that before the main clause. And then in winter, the sidewalks always get frozen and need salting. Okay, that's a when. So anytime we don't start with the who or the what, we need a comma. All right, to summarize everything that we've learned so far, we use commas for combining independent clauses, introductory clauses, separating non-defining relative clauses, separating items in a series or list, interjections, coordinate adjectives, items and dates, addresses, titles, and numbers, or when not starting a sentence with the subject, so not starting with the who or the what. Okay, everybody, that's it. A lot of content here, but now after you do all these homework exercises and you really nail all this stuff down in your brain, now you can write whatever type of text you need to with completely correct sentences, perfectly placed commas, and easily communicate whatever it is that you want. So just take a minute and think about how great that is, right? To be able to write freely and not have to worry about the grammar or where you're putting the commas or if your writing has too many mistakes in it. Once you finish these exercises and complete the lesson, you can really commit this stuff to memory, okay? And it's gonna help you every single day that you write in English for the rest of your life. So, good luck with the exercises, and I'll see you in the next lesson.